Oh, let's try to move this without making it sound really loud. Right, evening everybody. It is Saturday the 25th of June and we will continue with our American whiskies. And we're going to have this particular one, which was a miniature that was part of a, in fact it was 3 packages sent by Mr. X, who didn't want to be known who he was, so gotta respect his wishes, so thank you very much Mr. X. Now this particular one, and you might be able to see on camera sort of what the bottle's like. So it's a sealed miniature and the fill level looks pretty good, so I'm fairly confident that this hasn't kind of deteriorated and lost anything. But it looks pretty old, and Imperial at the moment looks like this. And it's owned by Barton Brands, which is a subsidiary of Sazerac. However, Imperial as a brand was previously owned by Hiram Walker, who was an entrepreneur, probably most well known for owning and creating Canadian Club. And this miniature from Mr. X itself does actually say it's from Hiram Walker and Sons. So I think this is maybe 1960s, but possibly from the 1970s. So this is pretty rare. This is sealed as well. But looking at sort of potential for auction, because Mr. X actually has really kindly donated a number of quite old single grain whiskies from Scotland. I think there's 7 of them from sort of the 1960s, so they're kind of like 30 odd year old, if not slightly more. And he basically said to me, look, if you want to auction them off, get what you can for them, and then put that towards the pot of donation to charity. So that's absolutely fantastic. And this is an old miniature, but it doesn't look like there's much value in this. So I am going to open this and use this as the brand Imperial, the representation of Imperial. Now, from what I've read about this, this might be slightly different to what the Barton Brands, which is the new one, but the most recent one. But it's essentially it's not too dissimilar in that Imperial appears to be, by saying it's a blended whiskey. Barton Brands, the version you can get at the moment, it looks to be 30% whiskey. No, sorry, 20% whiskey, whereas this is 30% whiskey, and the remainder of it is essentially a neutral grain spirit. So it's kind of the sort of spirit that you would make if you're making vodka and things like that. So there's not a lot of this. This is actual whiskey. From what I've read, it's possibly predominantly rye whiskey that makes up the whiskey constituent, and then the rest of it is neutral grain spirits and flavourings and colouring, essentially to make it look like whiskey. I've been looking for prices for this. You can find it in the UK through things like Master and Malt, but you're looking at about 20 quid, and that's more to do with just being able to get it over here. I think I'm going to have to use my teeth on this one.
Excuse me?
There we go. I know Chris Cook's a fan of when I do that. I found this, did a quick search on the net, and there's a winesearcher.com were basically listing various places, and there was a shop in Florida, so I thought, well, I'll look there. A 1.75 litre bottle of this is $17. For a 75cl, it looks to be, I mean, I even found a 1.5 litre it was on offer, but it was $11. The 75cl looks to be about the $10, if not $8-9. So we're not talking high end here at all. And with it being just 20-30% whiskey and the rest of it nutrigrain spirits, which is really keeping that cost down, I'm not surprised it's so cheap. So it's kind of with some hesitation that I'm trying this, because as I've read about this, it's not like the tin cup the other night where I know where it's from, but it was kind of just a bit more misinformation that was on the bottle and the label and everything like that. It was just a misrepresentation. But I knew where the whiskey was from, and it was a good whiskey, and I did enjoy it and everything like that. And I was probably a bit too harsh on it than I should have been. I think I was just a bit frustrated really about the fact that it was saying something that it wasn't necessarily. However, the more I've read about this, the more kind of unsure I am. I mean, this is the loosest form of whiskey, and I'm going to have another one later on in the challenge, but probably fairly soon, because it's an American that again is kind of the loosest form of whiskey. So if this has a colouring added to it, it's still fairly light, to be perfectly honest, and it does make me wonder if they've added colour, what the original colour was like itself. Probably pretty pale if it's 20%, 30% rye whiskey that's probably just been matured in some kind of cask for 6 months, something like that. Whoa, Jesus. Now, 80 proof. In fact, it does actually say on the label. I hadn't even tweaked that before. So it's 1/10 of a pint, 80 proof, 40% ABV, and it does actually say on the label 70% grain spirits. So 30% of this is whiskey, and 70% is grain spirits. And I might be wrong. But as far as I'm aware, from what I've read in a couple of places, that the Imperial that you get now is actually 20% whiskey and 80% grain spirits. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I've read in a couple of places. It's really harsh on the nose. It's really methylated. It's not a whiskey nose, it's a spirits nose. Oh God, it's really metallic. It's metallic. It's not citrusy and acidic and pleasant. It's just meths and metal and vodka. Smells of vodka. Yeah, it smells more of vodka than it does of whiskey. Oh dear God, do I have to? Yeah, I do. Because you've set yourself this challenge, Ben. So you've got to go through stuff like this. Oh, it gets worse as you nose it. It's almost like it opens up to become even worse. Normally, like quite a few reviewers and blogs and things like that will say, oh, leave it in the glass, let it open up, you'll get a lot more flavours. I haven't got time to do that. I'm doing one a day, and I'm trying to keep the videos down to 10 minutes, and I've done 7 already. So I haven't got time to leave it in the glass and come back to it and everything like that. So I've got to basically go with as it is in the glass, but it's got worse. It now smells of petrol, but not even petrol in a good way, in terms of you can get petrol-y undertones, like in a Riesling white wine, like in a couple of the ryes that I've had recently and a couple of the bourbons, which just makes it interesting and everything like that. This is stick your nose in your gas tank. Oh, Jesus. Holy shit. Okay, stick your nose in the gas tank, then stick a hose pipe down it, and you know how you can kind of siphon off fuel by sticking a hose in it, and then you kind of like suck it out, and just as it's about to hit your mouth, you let go and it siphons off because gravity takes effect and all that stuff. If you want the Imperial American whiskey experience, take that hose pipe and just keep drinking the fuel. Now, I've had some pretty cheap whiskies, things like the Hayes Parker, the Ancient Age, what was the one I had with the Hayes Parker at the same time? Let me have a look at my notes. It was Hayes Parker and Watkins Reserve, where on the nose they were really harsh, but then on the palate there was not a lot to them, but it wasn't harsh on the palate like it was on the nose. This is harsh on the palate. This is spirity, petrol-y, meths on the nose, and it's spirity, petrol-y, meths on the palate. It's really, really horrible. It's fucking awful. There's a really cloying, artificial sweetness that's almost nutty. But it's not I'm not a great fan of nuts anyway. If you watch my review on Borders, which was really intensely kind of hazelnuts and Brazil nuts and everything like that, I'm not a big fan of nuts anyway. But this is it's nuts, but it's not even like a pleasant nuttiness to it. It's not even, I couldn't even turn around to you and say, if you like a nutty flavour, try this, like I did with the Borders. Borders was, if you like nuts, you'll probably really like this whiskey. I don't like nuts, so I can appreciate it, but I'm not a fan of it because I don't like nut flavour. If you like nuts, drink Borders. Don't drink this. because the nutty flavour that's here is kind of it's an off nuts. It's slightly mouldy and foisty, and it's a box of nuts for Christmas that have been sat in your cupboard and have been sat there for about 3 years, and then you find them and you eat one. This is a bad one. I thought Hayes Parker was one of the worst whiskies, if not the worst whiskey that I'd had. It was certainly the worst whiskey I'd had this challenge. With very close, Prince of Wales is probably a tie. This is worse. There's very little whiskey flavour on it. It's a neutral. There's sort of like a very cheap brandy and a very cheap vodka flavour to it as well. And I think that's where that nuttiness comes from, is like a really, really cheap brandy. I think 3 Barrels. 3 Barrels was like a dirt cheap brandy that was rough as anything, and it's got elements of that. And that'll be that neutral grain spirit that they've put in it to essentially fill it up. Oh God, that was worse. Hayes Parker is better than that. That's a dreadful whiskey. Mr. X, I apologise because I know you've sent me this in good faith, and this is probably quite a rare bottle. And I sort of wish that you hadn't sent it to me, simply because I wish that you'd have actually taken that and sold it at auction or something like that and got some money from it and essentially foisted it off onto some other unsuspecting idiot that would have given you cash for that. And part of me also wishes that you could have had the opportunity, and I will keep it, and if you want me to send it back to you, I will do, to try it. I also hope that this isn't one of your all-time favourite whiskies and that you've got bottles of it that you absolutely love, because this is one of the worst whiskey. No, it's the worst whiskey I've ever had. Yeah, it's the worst whiskey I've ever had. Not just in this challenge, ever. It's awful. It's awful stuff. I can't even recommend putting it in cocktails because it will ruin the cocktail. I wouldn't recommend putting it with Coke because it will taste like you're drinking petrol with Coke. It's awful stuff. And $10 a bottle is a rip-off. I'm trying to get, and I haven't got any yet, but if anybody out there that's watching has got any Tesco Value, so this is like the really, really cheap, I think it's about £6-7 a bottle, Tesco Value or Sainsbury's Basics whiskey, and Asda do one as well, but it's like they put a brand name on it. I would expect Tesco Value whiskey, which is about £6 a bottle, to taste like that. But it's possible that it might taste even better. So I'm going to keep hold of this. I'm going to get in touch with Mr. X and I'm going to ask him if he wants it back. And if not, I'm going to keep hold of it. And then if I do source any Tesco Value or Sainsbury's Basics, I will actually do a little comparison. Like I did with the Hague Club and the Cameron Brig. I'll do a little comparison with this to see whether they are as bad or worse than this, which is pretty much going on the list as the worst whiskey I've ever had. But that's part of the challenge, and that's one of the fun things about doing this challenge, is the fact that I get to try loads of different stuff, and the majority of it's really good. Some of it's absolutely fantastic, and there are a few that are really, really bad, but there are going to be really, really bad stuff, and it's quite interesting trying them. So yes, it'd be interesting to see what the new one's like, to see whether it's any better than that. I would hope it's better with the new owners, but I don't really have much faith at $10 a bottle. Interesting. Right, I'm going to do a quick rinse out and then I'm going to do something slightly different, but I'll tell you why when you get to the next one. So I'll see you then. Cheers.